The first thing my husband said after seeing my father standing at our front door was absolutely not. My 79-year-old dad was holding one small suitcase. His house had a plumbing problem. The repair crew needed 3 nights to replace a damaged section of flooring. 3 nights, Dad said quietly. Then I'll be out of your way. I looked at my husband, Mark. We had been married for 28 years. I expected him to at least pretend to care. Instead, he folded his arms. Your father has a house. Let him stay there. The house is being repaired, I reminded him. Then get him a hotel. Dad immediately shook his head. I can pay for it. That somehow made Mark even colder. Good, then you can pay for the hotel. I felt my face burn. Dad smiled weakly. It's okay, sweetheart. Don't argue with him. That sentence broke something inside me, not because Dad needed a bed, because he had spent his entire life making sure he never became a burden to anyone. I grabbed his suitcase. You're staying with me? Mark stared at me. No, he isn't. I looked him straight in the eyes. Then I guess we're going to have a different conversation. I took Dad upstairs. Neither of us noticed Mark standing in the hallway watching me with a look I had never seen before. That night, I made Dad tea, and while he slept in our guest room, I opened our joint bank account. There was a withdrawal I didn't recognize, $38,000, and it had happened just 6 days earlier. I stared at the bank statement for almost a minute. $38,000. Gone. The description said, Hawthorne Capital Investment Deposit. I had never heard of Hawthorne Capital. Mark handled most of our investments, but we'd always agreed that anything over $5,000 required both of us to approve it. I took a screenshot. Then I heard footsteps. Mark appeared in the doorway. What are you doing? I turned the phone toward him. What is Hawthorne Capital? His expression changed, only for a second, but after 28 years of marriage I knew my husband. What? $38,000, I said. From our account, he sighed. It's an investment. You never told me. I was going to. When? When it started making money. That answer made my stomach tighten. Whose idea was it? Mark walked closer. Don't turn this into a fight. I asked a question. He lowered his voice. It's private. Private. That word stayed in my head because the account was not private. It was ours. Then Dad called from downstairs. Sweetheart. I left Mark standing there. When I reached the kitchen, Dad was holding an envelope. I found this in my suitcase, he said. I opened it. Inside was a copy of a bank letter. My father had received it 3 days earlier. His signature was printed beneath a loan agreement. I stared at the amount, $40,000. Dad, did you borrow this money? He looked confused. No, I turned the page. The borrower's contact information was familiar. It was Mark's phone number. Dad looked at me. Why would your husband have my information? I didn't have an answer. But suddenly, the $38,000 investment didn't look like an investment anymore. I asked Dad to sit down. Did Mark ever ask you to sign anything? Dad thought for a moment. About 2 months ago. My heart stopped. What did he ask you to sign? He said it was paperwork for your family property. I felt cold. My family property? Dad nodded. He said you knew about it. I had never heard a word about it. Then Dad added something that made everything worse. He came to my house when you were visiting your sister. I remembered that weekend. Mark had told me he was working late. I had never questioned it, until now. I went upstairs and found Mark in our bedroom. He was holding his phone. Did you use my father's information? He didn't answer. Did you help him take out a $40,000 loan? Mark's face hardened. You're misunderstanding. Then explain it. He looked at me for several seconds. Finally, he said the money was going into a business. What business? He said nothing. Whose business? Still nothing. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. I saw the name before he turned it over. Evan Hawthorne Capital. I remembered Evan. He had been Mark's college friend. I'd met him once 20 years ago. Mark always said they had lost touch. Apparently they hadn't. I stepped closer. Did you invest our money with Evan? Mark finally snapped. It was supposed to double. And my father's loan? That was temporary. You used my father as collateral? No, his voice was suddenly loud. Dad appeared at the bedroom door. Mark immediately went silent. Dad looked from him to me. Then he quietly said, "I think I should tell you something else." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a second document. This one had my signature on it. I had never signed it. I stared at the document. My name was printed clearly at the bottom, but the signature wasn't mine. "Where did you get this?" I asked Dad. He looked uncomfortable. "Mark gave it to me last month. He said you had already signed it." I read the first page. It was a power of attorney document connected to an investment company. My hands started shaking. "Dad, why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to cause trouble in your marriage." That sentence hurt more than anything. For 28 years, my father had stayed out of my marriage, even when he disliked Mark, even when he thought Mark was making terrible decisions. I looked at my husband. "You forged my signature." Mark shook his head. "You don't understand what happened." "Then explain it." He took a breath. "Evan's company needed temporary capital. The investment was going to pay us back within weeks." "Us?" "Yes." "Then why was Dad's name on a loan?" Mark didn't answer. That was my answer. I grabbed my phone. "I'm calling the bank." Mark suddenly stepped toward me. "Don't." I stopped. "Why?" His voice became quiet. "Because if you call them, everything changes." I stared at him. Then my phone rang. It was the bank. The representative said they needed to speak with me urgently about our account. And before I could answer, Mark whispered, "They already know." The bank representative asked me one question. "Did you authorize the $38,000 transfer?" "No." There was a pause. "Then we need to flag the transaction immediately." I looked at Mark. He was standing completely still. For the first time in 28 years, he looked afraid. The bank asked me to come in with identification and the original documents. I agreed. Then I asked about the $40,000 loan connected to my father. The representative went silent. "That loan was secured using a property document." My heart sank. "Which property?" He gave me the address. It was my father's house. I looked at Dad. He closed his eyes. Mark suddenly said, "Please don't do this." I turned toward him. "Do what?" "Destroy everything over one mistake." "One mistake." I held up the documents. "You forged my signature." "I was trying to protect us." "No," I said. "You were protecting yourself." He didn't respond. That evening, I took Dad to a hotel, not because Mark had demanded it, because I no longer trusted him around my father. Before leaving, I packed my laptop. Then I remembered something. 3 months earlier, Mark had asked me to update our home insurance records. He had taken my laptop and said he would handle it. I opened the files. There was a folder I had never seen before. Hawthorne Personal. Inside were contracts, bank statements, and a spreadsheet. I opened the spreadsheet. There were 12 names. The first 11 were investors. The 12th was mine. Beside my name was a number. $412,000. I almost dropped the laptop, because I didn't own $412,000 in that investment. At least I didn't think I did. I spent the entire night reading those files. The truth was worse than I imagined. Mark hadn't invested $38,000. That was only the latest transfer. Over the previous 2 years, he had moved money in small amounts. $7,500, $12,000, $18,000, $21,400. The transfers were deliberately spaced out, never enough to immediately trigger my attention. Together, they totaled more than $200,000. And then I found the real secret. Hawthorne Capital wasn't a legitimate investment fund. It was a private company owned by Evan. Mark wasn't just an investor. He was listed as a managing partner. My husband had been secretly running a business behind my back. Then I found something else. A loan agreement. My father's house had been used as security, but the money wasn't going to Hawthorne. It had been transferred to another company, a construction company. I recognized the name. It was the same company repairing Dad's house. I called the contractor immediately. "Can you tell me who authorized the work?" He sounded confused. "Your husband." I froze. "Did he pay you?" "Yes." "With what money?" There was a pause. "An insurance settlement." I stared at the screen. Dad's house had never been damaged badly enough for a $40,000 settlement. Something wasn't right. Then the contractor said something that changed everything. Actually, your husband told us the repairs were necessary because the property was being prepared for sale. Sale? My father had never agreed to sell his house. I looked at Dad. He was asleep in the hotel chair. I whispered, Mark wasn't trying to help Evan. He was trying to take Dad's house. And suddenly, I understood why he had refused to let Dad stay with us. It wasn't about the guest room. It was about keeping Dad away from me long enough to finish the deal. The next morning, I went straight to the bank. I took every document with me, the forged signature, Dad's loan papers, the Hawthorne contracts, and the spreadsheet showing the money Mark had moved. The bank froze the remaining joint funds while they investigated. Then they found something I hadn't seen. A second account. It was under my name, but I had never opened it. The account had been active for 11 months. Money had been moving through it every month, and the final balance was $186,000. I stared at the screen. How is this possible? The bank officer looked at me carefully. Your husband provided the identification documents when the account was opened. I felt sick. Then she showed me the signature used on the application. Mine, again, forged. I asked for copies of everything. The bank officer warned me not to confront Mark until I had secured my records. I listened. For the first time in my marriage, I stopped trying to protect my husband. I started protecting myself. I called a lawyer. Her name was Rachel. She reviewed the documents and asked me one question. Does your father still own his house? Yes. Then don't let him sign anything. I nodded. Rachel explained that the loan might be challenged because Dad had been misled about what he was signing, but there was another problem. The property documents were already being processed. Someone was trying to transfer ownership. I felt my hands go cold. How long do we have? Rachel looked at the papers. Possibly 48 hours. That afternoon, I called Mark. He answered immediately. Where are you? I said nothing about the lawyer. Instead, I asked, did you really think I wouldn't find out? Silence. Then he whispered, you weren't supposed to find that folder. I ended the call, and for the first time, I knew exactly what I had to do. Rachel helped me file an emergency objection against the property transfer. Dad signed a statement explaining what Mark had told him. The bank also preserved the transaction records, but we still needed proof that my signature had been forged, so I gave the lawyer an old document, my passport application, my driver's license, my original marriage documents. The signatures were obviously different. Rachel smiled. We have enough to start. Then she asked me something unexpected. Do you want to know why your husband refused your father for 3 nights? I nodded. She opened the repair company's records. The work at Dad's house had been scheduled for 3 days, but the contractor had received instructions to delay the final inspection. Why? Because Mark needed time. He had arranged for a property agent to visit the house while Dad was staying elsewhere. The plan was simple. Convince Dad that his house needed more expensive repairs. Get him to sign a sale agreement. Use the money to cover Hawthorne's losses. And if Dad refused, the existing loan gave Mark leverage. I felt tears fill my eyes. All of this because a business investment had failed. Mark hadn't been sitting on some brilliant secret investment. He had lost most of the money. Then he kept borrowing and borrowing, trying to hide the losses. My father was the next person he planned to use. That evening, Mark came to the hotel. He looked exhausted. I can fix this, he said. I didn't answer. He stepped closer. Please, you forged my signature. I was desperate. You used my father's house. I was going to pay everything back. And if you couldn't, he looked away. I already knew the answer. Then he said the words I never expected. I thought you'd choose me over him. I stared at him. After 28 years, that was the moment my marriage ended. Not because he had lost money, because he had believed my love was something he could use against my father. 3 weeks later, the truth was officially on paper. The property transfer was stopped. Dad's loan was challenged. The bank recovered part of the missing money, and the investigation confirmed that my signatures had been forged. Evan's company collapsed soon after. Several other investors came forward. They had believed the same promises Mark had made to me. Mark eventually admitted what he had done. He said he had started with one small investment. Then it lost money. Instead of admitting it, he borrowed more. Then he created another account. Then another. Every decision was supposed to be temporary, until his temporary solution became a $200,000 disaster. Our divorce was finalized the following year. I didn't take revenge by destroying him. I didn't need to. The truth did that for me. Dad's house was repaired properly. And the first night he returned home, I stayed with him. 3 nights became 2 weeks. 2 weeks became a new routine. Every Sunday we had dinner together. One evening, Dad looked at me and smiled. You know what I remember most? What? That first night. The night Mark said no? Dad nodded. You didn't argue with him forever. He smiled. You simply picked up my suitcase. I laughed. Then he added, that was the moment you finally picked yourself up too. He was right. For 28 years, I had believed keeping a marriage together meant protecting it at any cost. But sometimes protecting yourself is not betrayal. Sometimes it is the first honest thing you have done in years. And the strangest part, I never did find out why Mark called me 43 times the next morning, until the lawyer showed me one final document. It was a message from the property agent. Mark had discovered that Dad's house was no longer available for the deal. His entire plan had collapsed, and he knew I had found everything. That was why he called. Not because he suddenly missed me. Not because he was sorry. He called 43 times because, for the first time in 28 years, he was the one who needed me.